the Pomfort booth, and we got the AJ Colorbox. This is a Lut box, probably, yeah?
Well, it's kind of what I call is a Lut box on steroids, but it is at its heart, it is a Lut box. It's got a 33-point 3D Lut processor in it, which is standard for Lut boxes, but we've really built that out. Mm-hmm. And what do I mean by that is we really have 7 nodes of processing kind of built around that 33-point 3D Lut. So you have 2 additional 1D Luts, 2 3x3 MHCs, and 2 additional 1D Luts that we give you control over. So it's all, you can load your own files in there into the 1D Luts or 3x3s and the 3D and manage your look that way. So you get a more precise color transform by using what we call the AJ color pipeline.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so that starts, that pipeline starts, obviously you're using this to get the OS out of the way of your display.
Well, what we're using, so with this, we've got an Ethernet port on here that gets you a user interface to be able to control this stuff, right? But what it's got is it's got a 12 GSDI input, 12 GSDI output, so you can come in 4K, up to 4K,
right.
444 RGB, 12-bit, up to 30p, which people have been kind of clamoring for on a single wire connection.
Right.
And so we can come in and we can process it all, and then we can output it SDI or HDMI if you want to do that.
Nice.
Right? But we're doing all the processing in RGB 444 inside.
Right. And that can go to all the nice Flanders, all the nice...
all your beautiful displays. Sony, you know.
Sunshine. Oh, this is
Flanders. You get Flanders right here. Yeah. Can go to your nice
LG. The Sonys, what is it, the 300? The
X310.
X310,
yeah.
Expensive.
Yeah. So if they're too expensive, right, we also have an HDMI output that's a 2.0B, so it supports all the way up to 4K as well as HDR as well.
Awesome.
So, and it does all the proper flagging of the ancillary metadata for the VPIDs, the video payload identifiers, which is supposed to flag the downstream devices to what the transfer characteristic and color imagery is.
Right.
So we're making sure we're taking care of all that for you. There's a lot of devices that didn't really pay attention to that because they didn't have to, but now in this new world that we're in of HDR, in wide color gamut, BT 2020 color space, you got to make sure you're managing that correctly. Well, so if you're talking about calibration, that's actually kind of a different subject.
Okay.
So for calibration LUTs, this product actually has a great SDK that comes along with it. Anybody can have access to it. In fact, Pomfort, whose booth we're here on today, has access to it, and they control the 3D LUT that's in there in what we call dynamic mode. So if you're in live grade here, it's actually downloading LUTs as you adjust the CDL. It downloads that in real time to this box so we can process it and send it out.
Interesting.
So when we're talking calibration, we're actually working with 2 different partners right now, Color Space and Portraits Calman.
Yeah.
They can control this and actually have it generate the test patches that go to the display. Wonderful. Where they measure it and then create the calibration LUT, which then can either be loaded back into the display if it supports that, or loaded into this device, which then can calibrate the monitor.
Gotcha. So I guess that's where I was uneducated, is I thought this was primarily for calibration, but you're saying it's also for displaying accurate CDLs basically on your monitor.
On set. Yeah.
Nice. And a lot of on-set grading going on.
Yes, that's exactly what it's for. So on-set color grading, on-set look management. Certainly you can use it for the monitor calibration application. You can use it in live events and live production as well for doing SDR to HDR conversions or HDR to SDR. It's one thing I didn't touch on. So we support the user LUTs that you can load into it, but it also has it has 4 other pipelines, as we call them, that are designed for live sports production, live television production, to do SDR and HDR conversions. So we've got a color front pipeline that's in there. We've got this, we have NBC Universal LUTs that they freely distribute that we built in here. The BBC LUTs.
You can download those online?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they're widely used.
Shout out to Universal.
Yeah, they're widely, yeah, exactly. And so they wanted to try to make their look and a common look across lots of broadcasts, not just NBC's, but, there's a lot of media exchange, and they want to make sure it looks good for the customer. So hats off to NBC for doing the development and making it freely available. What's interesting and pretty cool is they did the development with a company called Chromorama, and Chromorama developed the LUTs And the tool that they use to develop the LUTs, we actually put in here as a licensable option.
Nice.
And not only did we put it in here, we put it in here in a different way. And what that way is we're doing floating point math when we do conversions with it, rather than using a 3D LUT. So we're actually getting a really precise mathematical conversion doing SDR to HDR. So you get away from interpolation errors with 3D LUTs. And so we really think that's going to catch on in live production.
Yeah, and so is there a reason, when I am generating LUTs for, great, like if I'm in Resolve and I make one to put in Premiere or whatever, I'll always kick out a 65 and a 33. Is there a reason that you're not using 65? Is that something that is not quite common, or what's the deal there?
It's just in a hardware-based product, it's a little bit more challenging to do than in a software-based product.
Okay.
And so for the customer base that we talked to about designing this and who we're designing it for, 33 point was good enough.
Yeah, sure.
And but for those people who want the floating point math, you've got the Orion Convert in here, which can do those transforms for you.
That's amazing. So the floating point math, is there a way to describe that in a dumb manner? Because I get it in like intuitively, but what is that actual?
So maybe
said service.
Yeah, maybe looking at it from a different perspective, a 33-point LUT looks at a pixel and it looks at the RGB values, and then depending on the interpolation that you have, we use tetrahedral interpolation, which is pretty good. It's pretty
not
good.
the best one, but
yeah. But you're only looking at 33 points, and maybe you go 65 point, but you're still finding a code value that's in between two places you're approximating.
Right.
And what the mathematics allows you to do is to get an exact value instead of interpolating and guessing where that pixel value should be.
That's I've name dropped him too many times. He's probably running away from me at this point. But it's the stuff that Steve Yedlin has talked about a lot when he's talking about all of his color math to replicate photochemical film on digital.
Yep.
He's always, I've had to read like hours of his stuff to finally get it, but everyone goes, so basically you made a LUT, and he's like, no, it's not that. And so he's doing his own math, he keeps saying, and everyone's like, no, you made a LUT. He's like, the LUT is the final thing.
Yeah.
It's all the math before you get that locked in look. So you're saying that's what's happening in the box.
Yes, but it's not going to a LUT.
Right.
Your conversion is happening in the math, and that's what we're processing and outputting. So,
and that's a higher quality result.
Higher quality result, yeah. Awesome. So I know we're at Cine Gear and we should be talking film and cinema, scripted and stuff, but in the same breath, broadcast is a big player, a big piece of the market, and that's where we're finding some success with this as well with that Orion Convert.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what's go ahead.
The last one of the last key points I will say is the latency. A lot of people ask like, hey, how long does it take to do this type of processing going through the box? And we've been able to do all the processing in less than half of a video line. So it's extremely low latency. So if you're doing live events, you're doing IMAG and a House's Worship, where you're doing LED volumes and you're trying to live grade the LED volume so it can match what's in the foreground,
right?
Then it's a good place for this.
That's going to be huge, because I just saw a virtual production thing yesterday. I won't say where. And that was my first thought, was like, oh, this car, because it's always a car, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this car is not matching.
It's not the same color as the background.
Yeah, it's just not quite close. So that's excellent.
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of traction with that as well. So there's many different applications where color management is a bit of an issue, and this thing's finding kind of its niche in helping people correct color and do it in a very precise way.
Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about in live applications, but that's no duh.
Yeah, AJ's had a lot of success in moving HDR through in live production and helping that industry move along. Our first product was the FS HDR, so it's a frame synchronizer, up-down cross converter, and it had the color conversion stuff built into it. And it's some very large events that use hundreds of channels of that for every signal going into and out of the production. So,
how many signals is it split out? Just one?
Yeah, this is a one in, one out device. And you asked earlier, before I interrupted you, about the list price, for the thing. So it's a single channel box. You can fit 4 of them in one rack unit, and it's list price in the US for $19.95 for the base thing. And you can license a couple things up from there.
Awesome.
But certainly the live grade integration, that's all included in the AJA color pipeline, and live grade doesn't charge, Pomfret doesn't charge an upgrade.
Gotcha.
Control it hard. So,
that was right at the last second, right when we were wrapping up. Thanks for showing me that, man. That's very cool.
You're very welcome. Yeah, thanks for coming by.